Do you know when it's not your year? The New York Giants certainly do now. The Giants fell to 0-5 after losing to the Chargers 27-22. And Dan, you and I may be playing wide receiver next Sunday the way things are going. The Giants lost 4 wideouts to injury in just one game. The most devastating being that ankle injury that apparently will sideline Odell Beckham Jr. for the rest of the season. He was placed on IR. Along with Dwayne Harris, Brandon Marshall getting further tests on his ankle. He's going to be out for a while. And Sterling Shepard's ankle injury is day to day. You know, Dan, watching this Giant debacle, it reminded me of another New York team that had championship aspirations when things first started and ended up getting sidelined by injuries. Because, Dan, the best laid plans don't always work out so well. And the Giants going into this game were 0-4. We knew what their odds were with the playoffs, this and that. They needed a win. They didn't get one, and they lost their entire wide receiver core pretty much. And now you look to the rest of the season, and you hope to get better. You hope to improve week in, week out. But it's tough. I mean, there you go. They're the wideouts. Roger Lewis Jr., get him on your fantasy team because he's the only guy that Eli Manning's going to be able to throw to. It's going to be tough sledding for the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't come up with a more awful scenario when you're talking about this football team. The fact that they needed a win in the worst way. And then not only do you lose again, all right, you lose to a team that's struggling in the Chargers, but then when you have this litany of injuries, and as you said, all at one position, Giants are trying to make a comeback there at the end of the game, and Eli's got 3 tight ends in the huddle with him, trying to erase that deficit. It reminded me, actually, while I was watching it, about 12 years ago, Herm Edwards, his last year as Jets coach, which didn't go good. Week 3 of the season against Jacksonville, they lose Chad Pennington and the backup Jay Fiedler for the season within like a few plays of each other. I mean, it was just on and on and on. And you say add injury to insult. That's what happened with the Giants. And now it's not even so much of where they stand overall big picture, right? They're 0-5. We know that they have tough sledding ahead of them. And look, for all intents and purposes, John, they're not going to make the playoffs this year. And it's going to be one of those seasons that in your worst nightmare as a Giant fan that you couldn't conjure up. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I thought this team would actually have a really, really good year. And I picked them to win the NFC East. But my goodness, it's one thing to be able to make a comeback. If you don't have the manpower, if you don't have the personnel, and you have guys like, Bundy or whoever we saw on the list there that they're going to have to sign off the street, it really is going to challenge Ben McAdoo, because now we're going to get a little bit more as to whether or not this guy is indeed the long-term answer to be the head coach. When you have adversity, when you don't have your best players, see, really good coaches, Bill Belichick, he's won championships shuffling guys around, making up for lost time with players injured. Let's see how good of a coach McAdoo is here.
Yeah, all eyes were on McAdoo before this game started. Now it's certainly going to be more focused. And on Jerry Reese as well. Look, last year, Jerry Reese, everybody loved. He made all the right moves on defense, laid out a lot of cash, turned the Giants around. They end up being a playoff team. This season, he doesn't invest in the offensive line like a lot of people thought he should. Instead, he brings over Brandon Marshall, who's been pretty much a bust so far. The fingers are going to start getting pointed when the wins don't start piling up. And it also goes back to the guy behind center, Eli Manning. I mean, people are wondering if Eli still has it, although he's played much better over the past couple of weeks. But when things don't go well, that's when all the finger pointing begins. And you got to look really in the mirror at yourselves and say, hey, we just got to get it done. And what you said, Dan, is very true. The expectations for this team were so high. I likened them to the Mets in my opening because the Mets, you felt like they were going to go to the World Series possibly, or at least win the division or get to the playoffs. All the injuries happened to the pitching staff, and next thing you know, you're playing for next year. With the Giants, the same thing happened. I think them and the Jets won't have the same Super Bowl odds right now because the Giants are at 0-5. They got to do a lot of self-examination, and now they're at a point where they got to play the kids. I mean, Gallman in the backfield, he looks like he may be a keeper at running back. That's great. You see what Enger could do at tight end. The offensive line, you know what you have pretty much, so maybe mix up a little bit there, maybe slide somebody out to tackle, who knows. And on the defensive side of the ball, they got to start playing like they did last season because they're not doing it now. And it showed you how the defense really carried this team for much of the season.
And that's the biggest disappointment, right? When we talked about, well, what is this team going to have to do to take it to the next level, win a division, go further in the playoffs, what side of the football was going to play better? Well, the defense has played considerably worse, and that, to me, is the biggest surprise. I mean, injuries and all that stuff, that's going to happen. But the way this unit has performed with guys who you expect, you're not playing rookies, guys you expect to go out there and get the job done, that, to me, is the biggest disappointment of this Giants season. It's the play of the defense.